Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we generally take a look at great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, cosmologies, and try to highlight them and show how they can be used, go in depth, and figure out what makes them tick. Today is our 571st video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. And Mr. Larson was an American engineer who lived in the 20th century. He died back in 1990. Left a lot of great books on physics and chemistry and astronomy and metaphysics, and 2 books on economics. We're looking at one of those books today. It's called The Road to Permanent Prosperity. It's basically a book on macroeconomics. And all of Larson's books are based upon the same general theory, and it's mostly encapsulated in his first fundamental postulate that he articulated back in 1959. The universe is composed entirely of one component, motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. And Larson applies this to economics. Along with, the scientific method. Basically, Larson's economic system is an economic system in motion. Its reciprocal aspects, I guess, rather than space and time, are production and consumption. And he starts from really the first principles. I guess work or starve. You must produce something. And he rails against all of the sociological economics going around, such as, people trying to come up with something for nothing schemes, minimum wage, taxation schemes that generally just move money around. They give money to some people by taking money away from others. And as he articulated here, we're in chapter 21 of this book called From Theory to Practice. And in yesterday's episode, he talked about how, your economic system has to be set up upon sound premises. Just like your scientific, like if you were an engineer and you were building a bridge, you can say, oh, I'd like my bridge to be this particular color or this particular design or whatever. But first, you have to design a bridge that is in harmony with the laws of physics. And then, after that, you can start worrying about the other stuff. So Larson is trying to put our economic system in line with the laws of physics. And he contends that you can set it up such that some judicious monitoring can allow you to have a system of permanent prosperity where the economic system is humming and it has a natural boom and bust cycle, but through some minor interventions, you can really dampen the amplitude of those booms and busts and pretty much put your system on an even keel where it just works. And Larson's other book on economics is called The Road to Full Employment. He also has some prescriptions in that book to eliminate the employment problem. So I figure these books are fairly worth looking at. These are problems that we have in our society currently. So, another voice of possible solutions might fit in here, especially given that it is based on a generalized theory that applies to all subjects. Okay, we are about to start here in the middle of chapter 21, From Theory to Practice. If you'd like to go back to the beginning of this book, start from the top, about 6 or 7 weeks ago, go back and start with chapter 1. If you'd like to get a more complete description of Larson's universe of motion and the fundamental postulates, what their ramifications are and how they are applied, watch any of my 474 videos on the subject. I go into it a little bit deeper. They're all really different, so choose one or more, many, and you can get many different perspectives on it. But today we're going to just go right into the text and of The Road to Permanent Prosperity, Chapter 21, From Theory to Practice, Part 2. It is true that some of the basic principles may have no practical application in certain economic organizations. The economic laws governing money and credit, for instance, are meaningless in a barter economy, but they are on the same economic statute books. They are on the economic statute books just the same, and they are immediately and fully applicable whenever money or credit is introduced. The oft-repeated statement that, quote, no theoretical conclusions in economics are valid for all times and all places is merely an excuse for the failure of poorly constructed theories to cover their entire field. Basic principles that are not equally valid for all economic systems and for all times and places are either incomplete or erroneous. Next, we note that these principles of economic science are mutually consistent, a feature in which conventional economic theory is weak. Indeed, the lack of integration of economic theory is one of its most outstanding defects. Each individual aspect of economic life has been treated separately as if it were contained in a special watertight compartment of its own. Microeconomics is at odds with macroeconomics. Supply and demand reasoning, for example, has been applied without regard for the limitations on total effective demand that are imposed by the current volume of production, with the very serious consequences that were discussed earlier. The resulting inconsistencies are largely responsible for what Keynes called, quote, the deep divergences of economic opinion between fellow economists, which have, for the time being, almost destroyed the practical influence of economic theory and will, until they are resolved, continue to do so, end quote. Last and most important, these principles of economic science are in full accord with all of the facts and statistics that are being compiled in every increasing volume by governmental and private agencies. Facts and figures which completely riddle many of the theories that are being advanced under the banner of one or another of the current orthodoxies. As statements of fact, These principles are completely independent of our approval or disapproval. Some of them conflict very definitely with widely held views as to what ought to be. But we invite nothing but trouble if we refuse to recognize facts that are distasteful and persist in patterning our actions on false assumptions. The facts are not hard to find. There is some excuse for errors and misconceptions in a field such as the study of atomic structure, where no means of direct observation are available, and the data obtained by indirect means are incomplete and rather uncertain, but most economic facts are readily accessible. Unfortunately, too many economists simply refuse to look at them. Certainly, one of the most striking features of economic thought at the present time, A.B. Wolf wrote in an assessment of the situation that is equally valid today, quote, is the prevalence of sheer mathematical logic without a shred of factual data. And he quoted the opinion of Wesley C. Mitchell that, quote, much of our pure economics is little more than a futile indoor sport. Not all of the professional economists are satisfied to accept this state of affairs in which the theory of their discipline is almost entirely divorced from the realities of life and is only a species of mental gymnastics. Critics within the ranks are plentiful, and the need for a more fruitful approach to economic problems is freely expressed. But these dissenters are too close to the picture to see it in the proper perspective. They are unable to recognize that something more than reconstruction of their theories is necessary. That what is needed is major surgery, the complete separation of the scientific aspects of economics from the sociological aspects, and the development of a true economic science. The new economic science, based on the findings of this present work, has furnished the exact, consistent, and universally applicable set of basic principles that has been recapitulated in this chapter. Here, in concise form, is the fundamental knowledge that is needed in order to lay out a workable program for reaching our economic objectives. With this information at hand, we are now ready to take up a consideration of the practical aspects of the various problems. In the pages that follow, the measures previously proposed for the improvement of general economic conditions will be analyzed, and the possible contribution that each is capable of making toward economic stability will be determined. Some additional measures of an appropriate character suggested by the facts brought out in the analysis will also be presented and discussed. On the basis of this study, a complete program for business stabilization will be recommended, a program which will eliminate booms and recessions and will permit the economy to operate on a permanent high level. Now, in yesterday's episode, the first half of this chapter, Larson went into and basically recapitulated many of the major points that he makes throughout the book, but especially his 17 economic principles that he maintains are mathematically exact. And so if you'd want kind of a quick summary of kind of Larson's take on the economic, his economic program, go back to yesterday's episode, and in the second half, you can check out all of his 17 basic principles. Okay, moving on. The conclusions reached in this study do not constitute an economic plan in the usual sense. There has been such a deluge of plans in recent years that the ordinary citizen is beginning to show signs of alarm when an advocate of a new scheme of this kind appears on the horizon. The primary purpose of this work is to identify and define the requirements that an economic plan of any kind must meet in order to accomplish the purpose for which it is designed. In essence, therefore, it is not a plan, but a yardstick for judging plans. Of course, in order to follow up the theoretical findings to their logical conclusions, the yardstick is actually utilized so that the final recommendations can be made explicit and in detail. But it should be understood that no claim is being made that these are the only measures that will attain the desired results. In most cases, several alternative measures are identified as suitable for the particular purpose in view, and the final recommendation is merely a matter of choice among these alternatives. It is also possible that other practical measures which meet the theoretical requirements laid down in the earlier chapters will still more satisfactory. Let's try this sentence again. It is also possible that other practical measures which meet the theoretical requirements laid down in the earlier chapters still more satisfactorily than those recommended will ultimately be devised. Inasmuch as this study was undertaken on the basis of the reasonable premise that the precise and well-developed methods of the physical sciences would be able to accomplish results beyond the reach of the less accurate tools of the socio-economists, there is no occasion for surprise when we actually do find simple and obviously correct answers to some of the major problems that have baffled the economic profession. What has been astounding, however, is the way in which these answers stand out in bold relief as soon as we make a careful and systematic survey of the pertinent facts in their proper economic setting, even before we have had an opportunity to enter into any exhaustive analysis. So it is with the study of depressions. As soon as we started to set down an accurate description of the operation of the economic system, preparatory to beginning analysis, it was apparent that the flow of purchasing power around the economic circuit is continually being modified by transactions involving inputs into and withdrawals from certain reservoirs along the line. Immediately it became clear that this is the key to the whole problem. Of course, considerable spade work was required in order to clarify the details of the operation of the price mechanism and the characteristics of the business cycle. But the cause and cure of depressions were already evident before the quest had hardly started. It is evident from the information developed in the foregoing pages that the cause of economic instability in all of its manifestations, money inflation, deflation, booms, recessions, depressions, and the business cycle in general, is an artificial variability in the flow of the circulating medium due to irregular inputs into and withdrawals from the money and credit reservoirs. The obvious remedy is to take compensatory actions which will counterbalance the net excess of the reservoir transactions and will maintain a flow of money purchasing power into the markets which will always be equal to the amount generated by the production of goods. Each of the various practical means of accomplishing this result will, however, have some collateral effects on the economy that will need to be taken into consideration in making a selection from among the available methods. And there are also certain basic points that should have special attention in this connection. First, it should be clearly understood that the business cycle is simply an alternation of money inflation and deflation. It consequently follows that any measure which is effective against money inflation is a measure that can be used to control the cycle. Complete stabilization requires control of deflationary as well as inflationary tendencies, but the anti-inflationary measures can usually be reversed for this purpose. It should also be recognized that the collateral aspects of these measures are irrelevant from the control standpoint. The objective is a regulation of the flow of money purchasing power, and the nature of the tool utilized for this purpose is immaterial. Monetary measures, fiscal measures, direct control measures, control of foreign transactions are all tools that are available for use, but none of these has any unique feature that is indispensable. Fiscal measures, such as variable tax rates, could be used for the purpose, in which case none of the others would be required. Or a program of some other kind could be adopted, in which case the fiscal measures would be unnecessary. The only requirements are, 1, that we know exactly what kind of a control over the money purchasing power stream is needed. 2, that we have some effective method of exercising such control. And 3, that we have adequate facilities for measurement and monitoring, so that the compensatory action can be applied in the exact amount required. But even though the collateral aspects of these various possible control measures are irrelevant from the standpoint of the control operation itself, they may be very important in other respects. The whole benefit of the stabilization program would be lost if adverse side effects of the control measures are as serious as the economic instability itself, or if these measures have some features that are highly objectionable to the public at large. The task of the practitioners of applied economic science, the economic engineers, we might say, is to analyze the various possible measures that have been suggested, or that they may be able to devise, and to determine which of these is capable of accomplishing the desired objectives with the least disruption of economic relationships. While we are recognizing that money inflation, deflation, and the business cycle in general are all one problem and can be controlled by one suitable measure or set of measures, it is equally important to realize that employment is a separate and distinct problem that must be handled by measures of a totally different character. It is true that under existing conditions, the business cycle has an effect, sometimes a very drastic effect, on employment. But our findings are that there is no necessary or direct connection between the two. A failure to recognize this fact is, to a large extent, responsible for the conspicuous lack of progress toward solution of these two serious problems. The discussion of economic controls in the remainder of this volume will be confined to matters having a bearing on the stabilization question. Some of the proposals that will be discussed also have other aspects that relate to employment rather than business stability. But these issues were considered in detail in the Road to Full Employment. Inasmuch as the findings of this work with respect to employment are in direct conflict with the current economic thought, which regards unemployment as the essence of the depression, and may also seem to conflict with the undeniable fact that depressions do generate unemployment. It may help to clarify the nature of these findings if we compare the control of the business cycle with an analogous task in the physical field, control of humidity. It is generally understood that the relative humidity in a dwelling is an important factor in the comfort of the inhabitants, and where possible variations are great, some control measures are desirable. In studying the situation, we find that there is a definite correlation between humidity and temperature. That is, an increase in temperature decreases the relative humidity and vice versa. This is the same kind of a correlation as that which exists between the business cycle and employment. When the business cycle, analogous to temperature, is in the rising stage, unemployment, analogous to relative humidity, decreases. In the downward stage, these trends are reversed. It follows that if we wish to keep the relative humidity at some suitable level, we could accomplish this by controlling the temperature. We would then be doing essentially the same thing that is now being done in the economic field, where the current approach to the unemployment problem relies almost entirely on inflationary measures for stimulating business activity. In the physical situation, it is easy to see that this problem of controlling the humidity by varying the temperature would be absurd. When the room is cold and clammy, an increase in temperature is quite appropriate, since this brings both temperature and humidity into the desired range. But applying the same corrective in a hot and humid situation would create a high temperature problem worse than the humidity. In this case, it is obvious that although humidity can be controlled by regulating the temperature, this is a very poor way of accomplishing the desired result. The efficient and effective method is to keep the temperature at a comfortable level and to control the humidity independently by adding or withdrawing moisture. Similarly, in the economic situation, we can reduce unemployment by means of money inflation, but here again, this is a very poor way of accomplishing our purpose, as money inflation has some very undesirable effects. Furthermore, an inflation of this nature must inevitably be followed sooner or later by deflation, so that in the long run, the beneficial effect on employment will be nullified. As in the physical situation, the efficient and effective procedure is to set up two separate controls, maintaining market prices at the equilibrium level by stabilizing the flow in the money purchasing power stream, and controlling employment independently by purely employment measures. Okay, that is the end of chapter 21, From Theory to Practice. I guess Larson will be talking about his proposals here in the rest of the book. I believe there's 5 more chapters. And chapter 22 is called Dealing with Recessions. And I guess it's a little bit too late to get started with this now. And since I was almost falling asleep a couple times during the current broadcast. Perhaps I might want to hang it up right now and start fresh tomorrow when we return. So thanks for tuning in today, and have a